They assured you that waking would feel like nothing but happiness, like golden light flowing into your body, wiping away the agony, the uncertainty, and the doubt that you had been experiencing. You would finally feel free, complete, and at one with the cosmos, as they had promised you. Nevertheless, that is not what took place, is it? Everything, on the other hand, went apart, and not in a way that would have been suitable for Instagram. In contrast, it was unrefined, disorderly, and unattractive. Your appreciation for the world has diminished. The conversations turned into noise, the smiles seemed like masks, and the individuals you used to call friends suddenly spoke a language that you were unable to comprehend. You made an effort to maintain your objectives, your routines, and even your first name. However, the more you clung to reality, the more it began to peel itself back like skin from bone, revealing a quiet that was so profound that it might make you feel afraid. In other words, this is the black side of spiritual awakening, the side that no one discusses since it cannot be packaged or sold, and so it cannot be marketed. It is the emptiness, and the fact that you are not only here, but also listening indicates that a portion of you has already encountered it. This emptiness does not come about easily. It arrives as if it were a betrayal, as if it were a death that would not declare itself, as if it were a truth that was too substantial to stomach yet too persistent to deny. According to a quote attributed to Carl Jung, enlightenment is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious. This darkness is the one that is being discussed here. The beginning of awakening is not in the light, but rather in the unraveling of the situation. In order to become happier, you do not wake up. Rather, you wake up to see everything, even the illusions, the lies, and the projections, particularly the ones that you have constructed for yourself. When you finally come to, the first thing that you notice is how long and how deeply you have been sleeping. The identity that you hold dear, the one that you have proudly defended, the roles that you have played, and the ideas that you have clung to, they begin to break apart. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like glass that has been subjected to tremendous pressure. And initially, you put up a fight. Obviously, you do, because the ego was never intended to be able to completely disappear. The purpose of its construction was to safeguard you, to shelter you from the abyss, and to allow you to put on the persona, the meticulously created mask that you presented to the world as being confident, in command, and smiling. On the other hand, the persona is no longer appropriate. Now it feels like you are being suffocated. As soon as you open your eyes, you become aware that you have been living someone else's dream, a dream that has been sold to you by your society, your family, or your fear. Not only does waking up from that dream seem like a sense of emancipation, but it also feels like a sense of loss. Not because they depart, but because you're no longer able to meet them in the same illusion. These are the friends who you eventually lose. The passions that wane, not because they were not genuine, but rather because they were based on a version of you that is no longer present in your life. When you begin to perceive the world, you begin to see it not as it appears, but as it actually is, fragmented, unconscious, and whirling in circles of distraction and denial. Moreover, you are wondering how I ever became a member of that. Why was I unable to notice it? One must pay a price in order to see. There is no comfort in clarity. To see is to hurt, and to feel is to disintegrate into pieces. This is the holy breakdown of the system. It is not in peace, but in bits that transformation starts, and this is where it begins. And here is the most difficult truth. You are unable to avoid it. The burning cannot be avoided in any way. Meditation will not help you get out of this situation. What we can do to avoid the collapse, due to the fact that the collapse is the path. The collapse is not a sign of failure. Rather, it is an invitation, an initiation, and a fall into the underworld of your soul. Jung referred to this phenomenon as the altercation with the shadow. As soon as you stop blaming the world and start taking responsibility for your suffering, as soon as you stop looking for light on the outside and start searching for what has been buried within, the things that you discover there are not beautiful, at least not at first. You discover feelings of fury, guilt, neediness, and envy, as well as the scars you swore you had healed. the voices you stifled when you were a child, and the facts you shuffled away in order to exist. You come to terms with the aspects of yourself that you were instructed to despise, the ones that did not conform to the image, that did not satisfy other people, and that were unable to adhere to the rules. And in the midst of that obscurity, an ancient creature comes to life. It is not a monster or a curse. Rather, it is you, the part of you that has always been complete and has always been waiting beneath the cacophony. To get there, however, you'll have to go down. On the contrary, this is not the kind of fall that you select. Rather, it is the kind that chooses you. The surface is ripped away, the illusions are stripped bare, and you are left shaking, naked, and alone. This is not happening because you have lost everything. Rather, it is happening because everything that is fake has been taken away. Despite this, there's a part of you that is aware that this is holy, that it is essential, and that it is the death that precedes the rebirth. There is no one who can tell you how long you will remain in this transitional state, this spot where the old you has passed away, but the new you has not yet arrived in its whole. You're not the person you used to be, but you're not yet the person you are becoming into. The liminal region, often known as the wilderness of the soul, does not come with a map. It is not a romantic weekend getaway. It is not a quotation from Instagram, and it is not a romantic quote. It is unfiltered, it is solitary, and it is quiet in the most profound way possible. Your own voice is the only one that can be heard in that void of quiet. Nevertheless, even that voice starts to feel somewhat strange. You can't help but question everything. What do I believe in at this point in time? Without my titles, without my patterns, and without my grief, who am I? That is the question. You come to the realization that a significant portion of your identity was constructed around coping techniques, that your success was frequently a distraction, that your generosity was occasionally a performance, and that your faith was frequently a barrier to avoid connecting with your humanity. You can now see it, the covert escape routes that your ego constructed in order to avoid doing the actual task. The doors to those exits have been shut off. When they reach this point, many people make the mistake of mistaking the suffering for failure. They escape the abyss and give themselves the name, moving on. However, you still remained. In addition, the deeper layers are beginning to reveal themselves as a result of your continued presence. When you begin to dream once more, it is not about your work, your lover, or your house. Rather, it is about yourself. Symbols, doors, flames, caves, water, and ancient eyes that are peering back at you from the shadows are all things that you see. Your subconscious starts to communicate with you, not through words, but through visuals, not through logic, but via myth. The realization that your life is not a problem to be solved, but rather a tale to be discovered comes to you. Additionally, in that narrative, the antagonist was never revealed, the chaos was never a spontaneous occurrence, and the collapse was never a form of punishment. It was a ritual, it was essential, and it was sacred architecture that was taking down what could no longer hold your spirit. This is something that you have read about in the past, in myths, in ancient books, and in stories that are older than your memory. The descent into the underworld, the shedding of false skin, and the call into darkness as a means of becoming rather than dying. Due to the fact that no one will ever inform you that awakening is the same as destruction. The end of the you that could be controlled, the end of the you that fit in, and the end of the you that settled is the end of all of these characteristics. And the thing that emerges from those ashes is not polished. It is not perfect, and it is not lovely. However, it is genuine, it is faithful, and it is whole. It is beginning to feel strange to you. It is not out of defiance that you start to decline, but rather out of respect for yourself. Not because you're upset, but because you're finally paying attention to what your body is telling you. You establish limits. In the future, you will refrain from explaining yourself to others who have never heard you before. You cease putting in excessive effort for a world that is obsessed with appearances. After a while, you cease looking for help in things that have simply served to keep you unconscious. It is not into comfort that you are awakening, but rather into the truth. The pursuit of recovery is no longer treated as a project. You decide to accept your agony and refrain from making any attempts to alleviate it. I'm not ashamed of your tears. You don't apologize for your anger. You feel a sense of loss for the aspects of yourself that you believed you needed to sacrifice in order to be liked. And in the midst of that sorrow, you start to experience grace, not the type that comes from on high, but grace that comes from inside. The sound is almost imperceptible, like a gentle breath in a chest that has collapsed, or like warmth in the depths of cold. It does not promise answers. It does not offer escape. However, it whispers, "You are not broken." You are becoming. Carl Jung referred to this process as individuation, which is the becoming of the self. This is not the version of you that has been shaped by society, trauma, or fear. Rather, it is the version of you that is buried beneath all of that, the one that has always been there waiting. This sense of self is not achieved via effort. Rather, it is attained through surrender. Not only do you remember it, but you also achieve it. You reclaim it from the ruins of the false life. And with each layer that you peel back, with each illusion that you burn down, and with each truth that you finally dare to feel, you get closer. You get closer to the pulse, closer to the soul, and closer to the still, silent place within you that knows everything that you lost was never really yours. It was alone. It was needed for survival. It was the cost of belonging to a community. But this self that is growing right now, this is yours. It is unrefined, holy, and wild. Even though the rest of the world might not get it, and even though you could experience a sense of being separated from the everyday, you are no longer separated from yourself. This is the true awakening that takes place. In spite of the fact that you are beginning to experience this sacred fire within you, there is no parade, no applause, and no guiding hand to tell you that you have arrived. This is because there is no arrival. Rather, there is just deeper entry. Having insight is not the end of the journey inside. Rather, it is only the beginning of the journey. For the first time, your eyes will become accustomed to the darkness. When you finally stop asking the world who you are and begin questioning your soul, this is the first time you have felt this. As time goes on, you start to see that this road is not linear. There is no conclusive examination, no certification of awakening, and no conclusion that is conclusive. It's possible that the same wounded will reappear wearing various disguises and speaking with a deeper voice, but this time something. Not the same. Continue to be present. No, you do not run. You do not get numb. You don't give in to the old diversions that you used to. You come face to face with yourself, and not just the light. You come face to face with the different aspects of yourself that continue to hurt. The child who continues to believe that they are unworthy, the guardian who continues to prepare for betrayal, and the dreamer who continues to fear being seen. And you choose to listen to them rather than silence them. You become present with their suffering and say, "I see you now. I'm not abandoning you this time. I'm strong enough to hold you now." At that precise moment, healing takes place. Via presence, rather than via the use of force. To love what was previously unloved, rather than to heal what is damaged, is the way to achieve this. Integration is a sensation that is similar to this. They are not pyrotechnics, and they're not some kind of transcendental euphoria. It is tranquil. It is consistent. It is the sensation of returning to one's own spiritual home after having been away from it for a number of years. When you start to rebuild, it is not in the same way that you did in the past. This time, there is no need to convince the world of your worthiness. There is no performance, and there is no projection needed. It is no longer possible to negotiate your value. And it is from that unmovable foundation that you start to live your life differently. When you speak, you slow down. You are more deliberate in your selections. You produce not to impress others, but to express yourself. You do not love in order to satisfy a need, but rather because love is something that comes naturally to you. It is not because other people are deserving of your forgiveness that you start to forgive them. Rather, it is because you no longer want to bring their burden into your neurological system. Suddenly, you find yourself dreaming once more, but this time, your fantasies are based on alignment rather than escape. Peace, not acclaim, is the best way to judge your accomplishment, at this point. Because you are no longer looking to be chosen, you have already chosen yourself. And as a result, you begin to walk into rooms with a calmness that causes people to feel uneasy. Despite this, there will be days when you forget about it. There are going to be times when the old self will gently pull at your sleeve, pleading with you to bring it back to life. It is certain that there will be temptations to retreat once more, to return to what is comfortable, and to exchange truth for comfort. Awakening does not make you indestructible. Rather, it makes you aware of your surroundings. This is perfectly acceptable. You will learn how to start anew, over and over again, without feeling ashamed of yourself. It teaches you how to remain awake in a world that thrives on your ability to remain numb, which can be the most challenging aspect of the experience at times. You have to understand that waking not only alters your internal world, but it also brings about a profound transformation in your interaction with everything and everyone. Perhaps you're no longer able to connect with the same individuals. The performance of culture, the never-ending distractions, the carefully crafted personalities, and the mindless consuming are all things that you might be able to see through. It is possible that you will experience profound sorrow for the version of the world in which you're no longer able to take part. Yet this sorrow is sacred. Your clarity is demonstrated by this evidence. You cannot unsee what you see once you have seen it. Thus, this is the price you pay for your consciousness. And despite the fact that this clarity may at times cause you to be separated from systems, from friendships, and from comforts, it will never cause you to be separated from the truth. And this is a sacrifice that is worth making. Rather from viewing solitude as a form of punishment, you start to view it as a gateway. It is not out of resentment that you start walking alone. Rather, it is out of devotion, for the soul only seldom discovers itself in. It is in the hallowed spaces that exist between destruction and creation that crowds come to life after a period of silence and stillness. This is the secret that no one will ever tell you. Spiritual awakening is not about becoming somebody different. Rather, it is about letting go of everything that is not completely authentic to who you are. This is not about achieving greater heights. Rather, it is about delving deeper. Discovering light is not the goal. Rather, it is to take ownership of your shadow. Since of this, you will no longer be looking for freedom, since you will have finally come to the realization that you are it. You are not the same person you used to be. You can sense in the way that you breathe now, slower, fuller, and with less haste. You can also feel it in the silence that exists between your thoughts. Because of this, you no longer have to be understood, you no longer have to be right, and you no longer have to win every conflict that is going on inside of you, because something has completely changed. You're no longer living to get away from yourself. Rather, you are living to encounter yourself again and over again in every mirror, in every trigger, and in every comforting discomfort. The fact that suffering is not the adversary is now clear to you. Pain served as the messenger, anguish served as the signal, and the fall served as the address. And you responded to that. In the midst of the flames, you walked. You confronted the ear-splitting silence that was your own being. As you gaze into the void, you were aware that it was you whom you were staring back. You came to the realization that the monsters were not real, and learned that they were merely aspects of you pleading to be loved, pleading to be remembered, and pleading to return home. This is the awakening. This is the work that has to be. Those who do not glow are not the subject of any poems written by anyone. It bleeds, it does not float, and it starts to burn. But it gives birth to something that nothing else can, truth. Not spiritual jargon with a capital T, not scripted affirmations, but truth that is genuine, unfiltered, and rooted in reality. The kind of truth that you don't express, but that you become. Neither books nor gurus, nor the glittering seductions of pseudo-spirituality are the places where you look for answers anymore. You are aware that the teacher was never outdoors and the temple was never located anywhere else. Internally, it had always been there, buried beneath the weight of shame, beneath the silence, beneath the din of a world that was scared of silence. You, on the other hand, opted for silence, listening to the anguish, the inner scream, and the voice that was hiding beneath the wound was a choice that you made. Furthermore, by doing so, you brought to mind something that the rest of the world had forgotten. Waking is not a fad. It is not an identity, and it is not a brand. This is a death, a holy destruction of the untrue, and it is a death. When you recall who you were before the world told you who you should be, when you remember who you were before the masks, before the trauma, and before the forgetfulness, you are remembering who you were. In addition, you now have that memory ingrained in your bones. It is not necessary for you to preach it, nor is it necessary for you to perform it. In a manner that you love, in the way that you forgive, and in the way that you refuse to sacrifice yourself once more, you practice living it. This is the paradox of awakening. It destroys you in order to reconstruct you. It separates you from others in order to bring you back together with your soul. It bears you in order to finally touch something that is grounded in reality. Moreover, now that you have experienced it, now that you have tasted it, now that you have seen the world through eyes that have been opened, you are unable to go back. Ever again, you will never give up your truth in exchange for belonging. There will never be another time when you mix connection with validation. It is not necessary for you to fit into areas that were never designed to accommodate your spirit. From this point forward, you are aware that you are not intended to conform to the norm. Rather, you are intended to awaken, to stand up, and to travel your path even when no one else comprehends it. In particular, you are intended to rouse the slumber of this planet, not via the use of violence, but rather by presence, through the peaceful, grounded, and ferocious embodiment of your truth. From this point on, you are no longer a seeker. You are not waiting for permission. You are not wanting to be selected. Rather, you are selecting yourself. Every breath is a choice to remain awake, to remain honest, and to remain open, even when it hurts, even when it's messy, even when your voice trembles and your hands quiver. Now that you are here, you are more complete than you ever imagined imaginable, and more you than you have ever been before. Instead of fixing yourself, you confronted yourself, which is the reason for your success. And as you faced it, you recalled that you had never been broken. You had simply been buried to begin with. You must thus rise, not as a hero or a savior, but as the soul that you are, which is scarred, sovereign, and shining in ways that the world can no longer reject. Because this is the true nature of awakening. It is not a switch for turning on the lights. Rather, it is a fire. In order to make room for the genuine, the sacred fire is what is responsible for clearing away the false. And it will continue to burn, not with the intention of causing you harm, but rather to prevent you from ever falling asleep again. Allow it to burn. Allow it to consume everything that you are not until the only thing that remains is the truth, and you will awaken and complete it on the inside.